Locust swarm ravaging Africa is now moving into South Sudan, that nation already suffering widespread hunger. More than 5.5 million people, nearly half of the population there, already lack adequate food due to civil war, droughts and flooding. In Kenya, the government is mobilizing young people to fight the plague, training hundreds of cadets in how to identify and eradicate the locusts with pesticides. The United Nations and local authorities are also asking for more aircraft to spray the bugs. The swarm could increase up to 500 times by June, putting tens of millions of people at risk for food shortages. For more on the story, let's go back to Pat.
CBN senior international correspondent George Thomas is just back from the region. George, you've made several trips to southern Sudan, which I understand is a Christian country. What about the suffering there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Pat. 3/5 of South Sudan is Christian. As you know, Pat, it's the newest country to gain independence, gaining independence from Sudan back in 2011. But sadly, in those years since independence, it has been racked by civil war. As John mentioned, 60% of South Sudan is facing acute food insecurity. There's been widespread drought. And then on top of this, you have these locusts. We have a map from the United Nations showing the locusts continuing to spread. You can see there right at the bottom edge of South Sudan. It's creeping across the border. It has made its way into Uganda and Tanzania. But again, it's coming to these countries that are already very unstable and facing all kinds of challenges, both politically and economically. And for South Sudan, Pat, it's almost just devastating. On top of all of this, the latest figures from the United Nations say that about 2 million children were about to face severe malnutrition, even without the problem of these locusts.
Well, George, you've been in touch with our offices in Kenya. What are they saying about the impact of locusts in that country?
Yeah, I just got a report this morning from our office in Nairobi, the capital city. They say that 17 provinces just east of Nairobi have been severely impacted. The worst one is Kitui County. There, a farmer just this week, Theophilus Kamanati, said to local reporters that he woke up last week and saw that his entire farm had been devastated by the crops. He said, quote, "The locusts feasted on the maize, green grams. They even ate watermelons. They also ate what was meant for our cows and goats. We are in a dire situation." The Kenyan government announcing just this morning that they were going to import hundreds of gallons of pesticide from the Japanese. They're deploying about 5 planes to try and deal with this problem. They're also looking into the possibility of using drone technology to try and combat this. But this is a huge problem. We're talking billions of locusts, and they're just a little late to the game, Pat.
George, one last question. Have you learned in your studies, has there ever been anything of this magnitude? They talk about biblical proportions, but this seems to be as extensive as anything in modern history.
You're absolutely right, Pat. For the people in Kenya, this is the worst they have seen in 70 years. In Somalia, it's been 30 years since they've seen anything like this. The latest reports from Somalia, over 200,000 acres of land completely destroyed. We did stories last year about locust infestation into Saudi Arabia. Today, Saudi Arabia is on national alert. Jordan has declared national emergency, and there is also concern that the locust coming through South Sudan will make its way all the way up to Egypt. And so when you talk about biblical proportions, you're absolutely right. Never have you seen anything like this. And obviously, folks are talking about the different changes in the climate and the amount of water and the rain that they've gotten in this part of the region that just makes it all the more challenging for those in these very vulnerable countries, Pat.
Thanks, George.
You're welcome.